Hello, I'm Pamela Davis. Welcome to episode 84 of the Well Done Life podcast. Hello, and welcome back to episode 84 of the Well Done Life podcast. I'm your host, Pamela Davis. If you're new here, hey, how are you? I am so glad that you could join us this week. I really hope you stay a while. If you've been here before, you guys know the routine. I love you deep. I really appreciate your consistent support, your encouragement, all the wonderful words and feedback. Thank you. It motivates me to keep going on the journey. So before we dive into this week's episode, I always like to make sure that I kind of do some housekeeping things first. This probably sounds like a broken record to some folks, but I want to make sure we're setting the foundation properly. It's so important. We're building a house, or as I like to say, this is a safe space. This is a safe space for women. So I want to make sure that we set this off right by building it on two really key important things, and that's clarity and love. So for clarity, like I mentioned, this is a safe space for women. I created this space because I felt that there were not enough places where women could really connect through our experiences. I really think that a lot of the experiences that we had, or have had, the good, the bad, and the ugly, those are the things that shape us. Those are the things that we can learn from if we just sat down long enough to have conversation. So my hope is that by sharing some of my journey with you and the journey of other women, that I will encourage you to do those same things within your everyday life and share your journey and experiences with people that you connect with or that you encounter, so that you can learn and grow with us. Because really, that's what living the well done life is about. It's about doing our best. It's about sharing our journeys, the good, the bad, the ugly, growing, learning, and just doing what we want to do in regards to our lives. So now we have clarity set up. Let's talk about the other main part of this, love. Love is just going to be what everything is rooted on. So I want to make sure that I always send out prayers to each of you. This week, I'm sending you prayers of peace. I'm definitely sending you prayers of hope, prayers of love, prayers of good health and prosperity. I want you to know that you are supported and encouraged. Like I've mentioned before in last week's episode and the week before that, it's like fourth quarter is coming in super hot, and there's so many things going on. And I think that we just kind of all need to take this opportunity to be gentle with each other. Don't get so caught up in the season. Don't get so caught up in life and in work that we forget to take care of ourselves, that we forget to slow down, that we forget that we are doing our very best right now. And believe me, sometimes that best is going to change from moment to moment. And you know what? That's okay. Just remind yourself that you are doing everything possible to live your best life, to be the best version of yourself for the people that you love and that could love you. And that is all that matters. So we've done the housekeeping. We've set the foundation. We know that this is rooted in clarity and love. So let's kind of start to make our way into this week's episode. I'm really excited about it. It actually is a little bit different. I haven't talked about this topic in a while, and I kind of wanted to talk about it because, again, I think with the world constantly moving and changing again and everything going on, I think it's important to bring it back up. So, and I actually have a special guest to help me talk about it. But this week, I really wanted to talk about caregiving. And I'm talking about it because I'm finding more and more as I get to know people and connect, I see a lot of people are transitioning more into becoming caregivers, either to their family members, their mothers, their fathers, their grandmothers, or in some instances, it could even be a spouse, because illness is rampant. Let's be honest, we're in the middle of a pandemic still. And so some people are having to take care of spouses who are trying to recover from COVID. And that still all is a part of the caregiving journey. And a lot of people, when I think about it, don't realize how young caregivers really can be. I mean, I think back to myself. I started being a caregiver when I was 38. And at 38, that was the last thing I was thinking about. I mean, in my 30s, and I think I was just really focused on working and traveling, making money, falling in love, all of those things. And my life got uprooted in a matter of 3 hours. And so it can happen to you at any point in time, especially as parents age and as things can occur. So as I kind of like to surf around for information, because when I first got started sharing content, that was actually the content that I shared. I shared my caregiving journey. I shared it under the moniker of 2 chicks and 1 old lady. Yes, 2 chicks, me and my sister. And of course, the old lady is my mom. And she knew about it and used to drive her crazy. But for me, it was something that I did because in therapy, my counselor was saying that because of my habits of compartmentalizing my pain, I needed to be able to articulate my words somewhere. So by writing, it gave me an outlet. And that outlet allowed me to connect with other people who were on the same journey that I was. Because when I first started, I felt so lost and so alone. And I didn't really know how I was going to make it. I questioned myself all the time. And I always found myself trying to find people who were in my age bracket going through it. And it was very hard to do because I'll be honest, if I think about it, a lot of people, you don't become caregivers for your parents until you become older. But that trend is changing. And we are seeing more and more, as the world likes to label it, the sandwich generation, of more people in their early 30s who are becoming caregivers, and more women in particular, because unfortunately or fortunately, it really feels like many of us take on the responsibility of caregiving. And it's not something that any of us are prepared for. I mean, having conversations in regards to your parents about their health is already a challenge as it is. So it's like you don't really have a roadmap and you're just kind of trying to figure it out, and it's difficult. So when I'm able to identify great resources, I want to make sure that I share them with you, which is why I am very excited to welcome Adrienne Glusman to the Well Done Life podcast. Adrienne is a caregiver, and she has a wonderful podcast, Young Life Interrupted, and she talks very heavily about her journey as a caregiver, her graduation from caregiving, and we talked about it all. So I am very excited about having her here to share her story with you. So please stand by, because she will be with you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome, Adrienne. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, Pamela. Thank you so much for having me on. It's such a pleasure to get to talk to you again. Mm-hmm. My name's Adrienne. I am a former young caregiver to my mom. I started my caregiving journey at the age of 29, and my journey actually ended in August of 2020. So I have a wealth of knowledge and experience being an only child caregiver, first long distance caregiving, then eventually caregiving in the same city. And now that my mom's passed away, and I call it graduating from caregiving. I've graduated from caregiving. I have been really motivated and fueled forward by a purpose to really step in and help serve other young caregivers through a variety of things I've been doing lately.
Well, thank you for being in the space, because kind of like that was one of the reasons why I connected with you, because I remember when I was a young caregiver and there were not a lot of resources out there, especially people younger who can understand the challenges and everything that you're trying to go through when you're becoming a caregiver. So thank you for being on and sharing your story. I kind of want to dive in if I can, because like you said, we'll talk about being graduated, but the fact that as a young caregiver, that made me instantly think, when you first got into the caregiving side, did you have any resources that you connected to, or was this the lack of resources why you actually started Young Life Interrupted?
So my resource was our best friend, Google. I mean, that was what I turned to. It was very interesting because when I first fell into caregiving, I think a big differentiator between seeking resources and not seeking resources is actually identifying as a caregiver. And that's not something I did at first. When I fell into caregiving, I just looked at it as, oh, well, I'm just a daughter who's taking care of her mom. I always knew I was going to do this, just not 30 years sooner than I initially anticipated. So it was very strange that when I fell into caregiving, I wasn't looking up resources for caregivers, resources for young caregivers. Of course, I was Googling keywords as it related to my mom's diagnosis or Googling phrases of things that were happening to her to try to get answers. But it wasn't until I would say a couple years later when I started self-identifying, then I started seeking out resources specifically for young caregivers. And that's really when I saw that there was a huge lack of resources. Of course, caregivers have similarities in many different respects, but as you know, having started this from a younger age, we're also going through a whole nother slew of life milestones and things that are specifically related to our age group. So in that respect, that's where I really saw the lack, that there was really nothing specifically targeted to, hey, I'm 29 years old, I'm in my 30s, and I've been thrust into this role. Nobody around me knows what this is all about. I can't turn to friends because no one's going through this. So it was really that. And then also seeing how many other young caregivers out there felt like they were the only ones going through this. That really kind of turned on the light bulb and said, wow, okay, something more needs to be done.
No, I totally can relate to that. It's funny when you were speaking, part of it kind of struck me in the sense that you said that you kind of felt like you always knew you were going to do this, but just obviously not as fast as you wound up having to do that. Why did you feel that way? Was your mom always ill, or was it just something that you took on as a responsibility?
Yeah, I think especially, and, trust me, I know that there are male caregivers out there, so it's not to downplay the role of a husband or a son by any means, because I know some incredible male caregivers. But I think especially when you're a daughter, you know that more than likely, even if you're in a situation where you have a spouse, that you're going to be the one that will be tending to the parents, the family members. I also think it was a byproduct of seeing my mom when my grandparents, her parents were sick. They were in a nursing home, and I don't remember too much because I was pretty young, but I do remember on the weekends going with my mom to the nursing home, spending time with my grandparents. So I think from a young age, kind of seeing that generational, well, my mom did it for her parents, so I'm probably going to have to do it for her, was kind of my first glimpse into that realization that one day I would step into this role. It's just that when you're young, you just don't even think that that day is going to happen until much later in life.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny that you say that, because I kind of think even in my own circumstance, I remember when my mom and her sister had to deal with my grandparents being ill as they got older and having to make different decisions. And it's funny because I know we kind of talked about it. It's like there's no manual. No one really ever prepares you for the caregiving experience except for what you're seeing from other people. And so, as you said, you were instantly thrown into that. And I kind of felt like maybe I jumped a little too far. Do you mind kind of going back and chatting with us about, how did it happen? Like for you, that you all of a sudden became a caregiver?
Sure. So I was living in New York City, and my mom was living in Tampa, Florida. So pretty far away. I remember that my mom at one point had told me that she had been diagnosed with Parkinson's. But for me, it's not like hearing a cancer diagnosis or something with, a very short-term prognosis. So it was strange because I don't really remember being affected by that, her telling me that she had Parkinson's. But one thing kind of led to another. I would go home to visit, and I would just notice kind of odd behaviors or things that she was doing. She lived in a second floor condo. And so I would come home and there would be all these trash bags just tied up lining the wall of the kitchen. And I just thought my mom was being lazy because she had recently retired. So I'm just thinking like, oh, she's just being lazy. She's a retired woman now. So to make a long story short, there were little things that kind of were bugging me in the back of my mind, but I just brushed over them. And it was 2011. And I used to talk to my mom every morning before I went to work. I would always call her on my way to work. And that day she just didn't answer. Well, we're all busy. So I just figured, well, maybe the phone's in the other room. I'll try calling her later. Well, as most of us know that have full-time jobs, once the workday starts, the next thing you know, it's like 5:00.
Right.
So it was super strange because it was a busy day. And then finally it dawned on me, I haven't heard back from my mom because she would always call me back if she missed my call. So I called again. And I called again, nothing. So I knew that night she had told me the night before she was going to dinner with a friend. So I reached out to the friend. I said, hey, I know you're probably going to mom soon to pick her up. Something's not right. She's not calling me back. I don't know what's going on. Can you go over there now and see what's up? So I am freaking out because, you just automatically, your brain just goes to the worst place possible. And what ended up happening is she passed out or tripped. Nobody really knows. And she was out cold for, we don't even know how many hours.
Oh, wow.
And that was that pivotal moment that I say that I knew my life was going to forever change. I didn't automatically have to jump into that all-in caregiver role, but the wheels started turning in. It's not safe for her to live alone anymore. It's not great that I'm so far away. We have no family close by. What if I can't get in touch with her again? So I started taking all of these little preliminary caregiver roles, even though, again, I never equated it to caregiving. And that's kind of how it all started, which I think is the case for a lot of people who fall into caregiving. You start slowly taking the small steps, little things off of their plate until it, of course, becomes more full-time caregiving. So that was the catalyst that kind of launched me into my caregiving role.
Wow. And I could understand that. At least your transition, obviously, it was kind of abrupt, but like you said, it wasn't like you had to jump full in. And it's funny because I understand what you're saying. It's like you hear them say all these different things that are going on with their health, and you're just like, okay, I think our rational mind is, we're like, you're right. It's not like this isn't cancer. So they, and moms and dads typically are like, it's okay. I've got it managed.
Of course.
And right. Yeah. And at that point, did you have any communication with her doctors or anything at that point, or not really?
So no, I mean, she was still fully capable. So I said, okay, so you have Parkinson's. So, she's like, oh, well, now I'm going to a neurologist. And she was still fully capable of being able to get herself to her appointments. She was able to retain the information. And it was strange because I felt like I didn't ask that many questions. Because again, to your point, I felt like she had it handled. It was just like going to any other doctor and going to the appointment and getting the prescription for the medication. So to be perfectly honest, I didn't feel the need to be all in. I didn't feel the need to pick up the phone and call the doctor and ask for a copy of the report and what medication did you prescribe. I just didn't feel the need because she still seemed all there and that she could handle it. And I didn't feel the need to have to start stepping in and, I guess, taking that independence away from her. So to speak. So,
and I think that that's a good approach, even though I think it just depends on the circumstance, because I can imagine for some people, I know for myself, I didn't have that luxury. I had to take in because of the severity of what was going on. But for you, do you find that made it an easier transition for you to take more of a caregiving role with her versus all of a sudden having to go all in and take over everything because of that potential loss of independence?
Right. It was definitely, I think, compared to some people that are thrown into situations, which, like you were, for me, it was like I could start taking small steps and slowly start trying to kind of wrap my head around the reality of what was happening versus being thrust into it at once. You know, like the initial reality was, okay, she can't live alone. And until we can get her in a place where she won't be living alone, I have to put some sort of life alert or something in place. So it was almost like baby steps. Okay, here's my immediate problem. This is what I have to tackle. And then I started taking over her finances because I was noticing some things weren't right there. So it was kind of like taking those two pieces off of her plate at first, which it seemed manageable to me. I was like, I wasn't completely overwhelmed. I wasn't freaking out that I all of a sudden had 1,000,001 things to do. So yeah, I think that not being thrust into it all at once really did help me maybe ease into it a little bit better, so to speak, or at least start preparing myself for what was to come. Even though I didn't really know the intensity of what was to come, nobody does, right?
Oh, absolutely not. And I wanted to highlight that because I always feel like sometimes when we have those opportunities where we can take in little steps, you know, it's a hard conversation. I know, like, I tried to do some of it with my parents before things kind of got bad, and it was a bone of contention. It creates frustration because obviously they don't want you taking over their life, and you're trying to be proactive. So it's like the struggle starts to begin. Yeah. So I was curious how that was with you and your mom. Was your mom resistant, or was she okay with you starting to come in a little bit?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I was actually just talking about this with somebody the other day, trying to learn more about personality types of our parents or the people that we're caring for pre-disease. Like, what was their personality like? For my mom was very much a go with the flow, very passive person. Like, she never wanted to create conflict. She was not that very strong, assertive personality. So when I started saying, like, hey, you're not going to be able to live alone anymore, I think we should do X, she was like, okay, right? But I also still opened up decisions for her to make. I wasn't like, okay, you need to move into independent living and this is where you're moving. It was like, no, I've done a lot of research. This is what I think is the next best step. Come with me. Let's go look at communities together because I want to make sure that you're making this huge leap in your life. So I want to ensure that you're happy too. But I also know that my mom put so much trust in me that anything I did or said or wanted to do on her behalf, she would have just rolled with it. And she did. You know, she got to the point, of course, where it was like she wasn't making decisions and I was making all the decisions. But I know that she trusted me with all the decision making, if that makes sense.
That totally does. And I think that that's a good thing that we're talking about because, again, when you're I think some of us come in like a bull in a china shop where it's like we see things are wrong and we just want to get that list out and check out, no, I got to get this, I got to get this. But you have to understand in a lot of instances, they're still viable parts of the process. They want to, like you said, you were seeking out your mom's help. You were building that trust in that relationship with her so that you guys could navigate this together. And I'm not saying that that's the way it is for everyone by no means. Oh yeah. But I think the fact that you did that probably would help contribute to an easier situation for her, which is great. Did that help you also managing your stress? Because you sound like you're taking on all this other stuff. How are you feeling while you're doing this?
You know, I've heard so many stories and that's why I'm like, Mom in heaven, thank you for being that passive personality. Because I hear so many stories from other young caregivers that one of their biggest, not just young caregivers, any caregiver, is that one of the biggest struggles and challenges is that their caree is so autonomous and they do not want to hear anything and they do not want to accept or admit what's happening to them, which makes it so much harder for the caregiver to try to implement any change, to try to bring in outside help, anything. So yeah, I would say it helped in some respects with the stress because I felt like I was able to take those 2 steps forward without taking 10 steps back, right? I was able to just say, okay, here's the idea, let's go with it, instead of being stressed out about like, okay, great. So Mom can't stay here, but she doesn't want to go there and she refuses to leave her home. And now I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place because now I have to figure out a happy medium to keep her happy. I didn't have any of that. So I definitely feel that took a solid level of stress off of my shoulders. Of course, there was still so much more compounding stress, but I have to say, like, not having that fight and not having that struggle, especially from her end, definitely helped. And it helped me help her faster, right?
Right. You're right.
So that really helped as well.
That's good because, again, like you said, that trust, that relationship, it helps bring ease to both of you while you were going through. So was that throughout most of the caregiving journey with your mom? Did you feel like she was like that? Or as she went into more care directed facility where you were more hands-on, did you feel like any of that started to change?
I'm telling, I don't know what it was about my mom, but she never pushed back. She never did, Okay. Again, I don't know if this comes back to a specific personality type. That's why I was like, that would be an interesting research project to take personality types of people and see, like, based on their personality type, like how they are, like when they develop a disease. Like, I would just be interested to connect with other people whose Carrie was definitely more on the passive, go with the flow kind of side. You're like, no.
No, that's not mine. Now we're getting to that point, but we're 10 years in. That's how we got to it. First couple of years, we're like, I'm really going to put you outside in a few minutes if you don't calm down.
I'm sure. So honestly, I think it just got easier as we went, because I think then it just got to the point where my mom trusted, and it also got to the point where she just really wasn't able to understand what was going on. So, the power of attorney and everything, like, I officially stepped in and was making those executive decisions on her behalf. But I know she is looking down and probably saying, like, Adrienne, every decision that you made for me along this journey was 100% the right one.
And that's so beautiful. That has got to be beautiful. I was going to say, so how have you been doing now that you have graduated from your caregiving journey?
Oh, well, it's definitely, as a caregiver, you always know that day is going to come. But I think the reality of when it actually hits is unlike anything that I've ever experienced. It's actually really interesting because after my mom passed away, I learned about this term, anticipatory grief, that we as caregivers experience. I especially experienced it. My mom had multiple system atrophy, which is a neurodegenerative disease. So it has no cure. So all you start seeing is either kind of a plateau, or it's just like the next level of decline and the next level and the next level and the next level. So it was really interesting to me because when my mom passed away, don't get me wrong, I was extremely sad. But I always imagined what I would be like when she passed away. Like, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed. I wouldn't be able to eat. But I realized that as a result of experiencing anticipatory grief for 10 years during my care journey, it's very strange because it almost helped me to better prepare for the end and how to deal with the grief. Grief is definitely its own journey. I say, like, I was on my care journey for 10 years. Now I'm on my grief journey. I'm a little over a year into my grief journey. And it's, some days I'm good and some days I'm not, like yesterday, something will set me off and I'll have a little trigger and I'll just kind of go in a downward spiral. But, I've definitely missed my mom so much, but I've definitely come to accept what happened and really look at it as in she's in a better place. And that's really all that matters. She's free from her disease. I'm hoping she's living her best life behind those pearly white gates, but
absolutely.
But it's a journey in and of itself. That's for sure.
Well, I can only imagine. And I know we have talked about grief when we were talking before. It's tough. It is lots of highs and lows. And, but I'm glad to see that you're making it through. and you just got engaged. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. And earlier this year, I got engaged on my 40th birthday. So that was bittersweet too. You know, it's like, of course, I'm super happy and super excited, but there's a lot of bittersweet feelings that come along with it. But I always say that I know that my mom knew that she could go once I met my fiance. I feel like she finally knew. I remember like a couple weeks before she passed, she was like grilling me, like, do you love him? Does he treat you well? All of these things. And now looking back, I'm like, she was like, all right, I can go. She's in good hands and I can let go now. So.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. It's funny. My mom is always, that's one of the things that she thinks about for my sister and I. She's like, I just want you to have someone to care for you the way that you deserve to be cared for when I go. So she's always wondering and thinking, how was navigating love while being a caregiver? Tell me.
You know, I've got a ton of dating stories, which is a whole nother podcast and a whole nother episode.
I feel you. We can probably bond on some of these horror stories too. Yeah.
You know, I think it gets to the point, caregiving aside, right? When you start getting upper 30s, you know, you really start wondering, is this ever going to happen for me? Right. And then you throw caregiving into the mix. So not only are you wondering if this is ever going to happen for you, but now you've also got this huge responsibility and this person that you're caring for that really is your number one priority in your life. And then it's like, okay, now is this ever really going to happen? Because I have this whole other layer built in. And, you know, there were times when I said, you know what, I think my purpose is just to be a caregiver, and it's okay, God, universe, whatever you believe in, it's okay if I don't meet my person. This is my purpose. I am doing what I was put here to do. And my mom would always say, like, Adrienne, you just have to be patient. God has somebody waiting for you. Just be patient, be patient, be patient. And I am the most impatient person you'll ever meet. So this patience, I'm like, come on, people, like, enough with the patience. And, you know, I think it's definitely hard as a caregiver when you're seeing so many people around you, because like when you're in your 30s, that's the age when like all your friends are getting married, they're starting families, they're buying their first house. And, you know, here you are, you're like, it's like, what is it? Finding Nemo or Finding Dory. It's like, just keep swimming, just keep swimming.
Yeah.
And that's how you feel. But you know, I would get super discouraged and I would think like it's never going to happen for me. But I think honestly, I just put trust in that it was going to happen. I just put trust in that. Timing is very cliche, but timing is everything. I dated some guys and I would talk about caregiving a little bit, but like they just wouldn't get it. They wouldn't take an interest in this huge part of my life. And honestly, like I didn't really want to talk about it that much if I didn't have to. Because it's not sexy. Like, it's not what you want to talk about when you're getting to know somebody. You know?
Right. Like, hey, I'm taking care of my mama. What do you think? Right.
Exactly. Like, sorry, I got to go home and change my mom's diaper. So that's a good topic.
Yeah. Right. I understand.
You know, but I think, honestly, it's when it comes down to it, it's not wasting your time on the bad ones. It's holding hope and holding faith that you're going to find the good one, and you will find the good one. I mean, I met my fiance, Ian. I met her mid 2019. So about a year before my care journey ended. But, you know, I'll never forget when we first like exchanged Instagrams. I had a link in my bio to this article about my mom and I that was written in the Wall Street Journal. And I totally forgot that was there. So like after we exchanged Instagrams, there was just like silence. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And then the next thing he writes is, that's amazing what you're doing for your mom. Aww. And my heart dropped though, because I said, oh no, I forgot about that Wall Street Journal article. Like it is out there. Like he is not going to want to talk to me anymore. But he did. And he looked at my care journey and what I was doing for my mom. as something admirable. And honestly, like later on in our relationship, made him love me and fall in love with me even more. Because what we do is so selfless in many ways. And it's such a quality that like the right person will see. So hold out the hope.
Oh yeah. I still haven't given up hope. And I love that. And I think more people need to hear it, because when you're in that caregiving struggle, I mean, we're talking about falling, love doesn't even, it does seem like one of those things. It's like, well, if the Lord wants me to have somebody, I will. And you're in the back of your mind, like, I don't know if I believe that, but I'm trying, Jesus. So to hear that you actually found someone who supports you and encourages you, I think that's beautiful, because it's such a vital part. Everybody deserves love. And as caregivers, you need it more than ever, because you're carrying on so much. Because I was going to say, you found love. How did you maintain friendships? Like, how did you maintain your life in the middle of this?
You know, I mean, I do say that I was never in a position where I was a 24/7 caregiver. And that to me is a huge blessing. Like, even though my mom lived in assisted living, like I was never one of those people that just dumped her and said like, well, Mom, there you go. You guys take care of her. It was never like that. It was more, I was there about 30 hours a week, like hands on with her. So it was more that assisted living, like we had the means to afford it. And the decision was that it would provide her better care. So I did have that quote unquote escape. Like I did have that time at night to go home and I could meet up with a friend. You know, I would say that I'm very blessed. I have amazing friends that were just always very understanding of the journey. They were always there for me. You know, if my mom went to the hospital, you know, the first person I would send a mass text to all my friends on our group chat. And, you know, they would be like, can we come? Can we bring you dinner? Can we come sit with you in the emergency room? Like, I don't know. I was able to maintain those friendships because I think my friends knew that this wasn't a choice what I was doing, right? But I was doing it and they respected me more for it. And I was able to maintain like the friendships because there would be times when I love my friends, but I didn't feel like doing anything, or I didn't feel like hanging out, or I didn't feel like picking up the phone. And they understood it. Like they didn't take offense to that. They didn't take offense to the fact that maybe I didn't feel like hanging out or talking because I was going through a lot in terms of caregiving. They just got it and they understood it. And I know that's a huge struggle for caregivers, is that when they fall into this role because they have very limited time. And if they do have time, their energy is very, very, very limited. So a lot of people just can't understand and kind of leave them behind in the dust. And it just breaks my heart to hear that. Because we're all worthy of friendships and love too. Like you said, in terms of a relationship, same things with friendships too. So
absolutely. I find that when you become a caregiver, to me, you really get down to the heart of who your real friends are.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, like you said, the time is so limited. And I think people don't understand that as caregivers, we already carry so much guilt because you know that you only have so much time to dole out to everything that you do. Yes. I know for myself, I really struggled with, I feel bad that I can't live up to what I want to do for other people sometimes, just because I'm exhausted emotionally. So there's only so much that I've got to give. So I think it's important that people hear that that's really what support looks like. Like it's group text, and it doesn't have to be complex, because I think people get confused, you know?
Right. And I think it's also recognizing, you know, one thing I've learned even outside of caregiving with friendships, I truly believe that there are seasons of friendships. And I think that if someone is bumping up against one of those seasons of friendships, you have to just learn to release it and just let it go, because other friends will come along and then the right friends will stay in place to support you through the journey.
Absolutely. I'll be honest, I've started to apply that same situation with relationships, because I've tried, like you were saying before, you know, tons of dating stories, like some horrible experiences. God. But I feel like what you were saying, there is someone out there that will understand what you're going through, who will support you and encourage you and admire it. You just have to be patient. and understand the seasons of it all. So I think that's wonderful that you found someone and that you've lived still whole and fully in this.
Yeah, it's something that I often look back and it just, I feel very blessed. I mean, I really do, because like I said, there were some rock bottom moments where, you know, I was like, well, I'm just going to be the old cat lady with even though I hate cats.
I know what you mean.
With 1,000 cats. And you know what? That's okay, because this must be God's plan for me, you know, and that's
right.
Okay. But, you know, I do feel very blessed. And I also feel very blessed that even though my mom's not here and she won't be there for the wedding and everything, that she got a chance to get to know Ian and get to know who he was. So that brings me a lot of peace and comfort as well. So
I love it. It's funny. I have it up too. When I was on your Facebook page, I saw this quote by you. And it said, doing all of this, living through a season of caring is something you will never regret as long as you live. Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't doubt it's the thing that you're going to be the most proud of doing in your lifetime.
Yes.
When did you come to that realization?
I want to say probably towards the end of my care journey, because when you're in it, you just can't see it. I mean, it's like anything else in life, right? Take different instances, like not getting the job that you wanted or the relationship you thought was going to be it not working out. When you look back in hindsight, you understand why. And at the very end of my journey, I understood why I was being put through all this. And actually, when my mom was transitioning and I went to see her and I kind of said my goodbyes, that is one thing I said to her. I said, Mom, sorry, I'm going to get choked up.
I'm sorry. I don't want you to.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You know, I said, caring for you will always be my highest honor in life.
Yeah.
And I made sure she knew that, because it's a very long, emotionally tolling, physically tolling, frustrating journey. And more often than not, I probably took it out on her and let her see like way too much emotion and way too much frustration. But I needed her to die knowing that no matter everything that we went through, 100%, I would do it all over. I would do it all over if I had to. It is the highest honor in life. It is if I were to die tomorrow, God forbid, like I can die knowing that I did something incredible for the woman who was the most amazing person in my life. She did it all for me. So I was able to do all of that for her. And that is the highest honor in life. Right. So, yeah.
That is beautiful, because I have felt that way. I'm not at the end of my journey. And so when I saw it, I said, I understand. I've gotten that moment. And I think when I wanted to make sure I talked about it, because I think when you're in the caregiving journey, like you said, it's hard to see it. Like you're in the trenches. Some of us are in whole different cycles. Like everybody's caregiving journey is so different. Yeah. But I feel like we need to spotlight the fact that this is an honor that we are all being given, because a lot of times it feels like a chore, and it is a chore in the middle of it. Yep. It is full on, but that we should honor what we are doing because of the sacrifice. And sometimes you have to hold on to that thought and honor. I know for myself, and I've told my mom this, I would not have the relationship I have with her now if it had not been for this. I was a daddy's girl. My parents were still together, but my father, he owned my heart. And so this time that we have had has really brought us so close. And like I was telling someone recently, I said, when she goes, I have no regrets, because I never left anything unsaid.
Yes.
Never. There is nothing unsaid between us. Everything is said. So I think that, you know, as caregivers, sometimes we have to remember those things.
Yeah.
This time for that, not necessarily focusing on the work. The work, unfortunately, it is going to be there. That's what we're going to do. But remember the time, the memories that you were building and will create. they're going to carry you through. So when I saw your post with that, I said, oh my gosh, that takes such clarity to be able to feel that way. And I admire that you're at that point, because I'll be honest, you read a lot of stories about caregivers after the journey who struggle.
Yes. Yeah. And, I look at it as this is such a hard journey, and it's so hard to look at the silver linings, right? It's so hard when you're in the thick of it. And I'm the same way. I mean, my mom and I come from a split household. So my mom was always my best friend. And when I went off to college and then I moved to New York, I mean, there were a ton of years where I only saw my mom maybe like twice a year, for holidays. And I always said to you, like, if caregiving would have never happened, my mom and I wouldn't have had more time together. Trust me, it's not the kind of time I envisioned that we would have together in her retirement. Right. I mean, I had these grand plans for us that we would be traveling and doing all these things together. It wasn't that by any means, but
absolutely.
We were blessed with so much time that so many people don't have with their parents for one reason or another, because you live in a different state, because you have a family of your own that you're taking care of. And I didn't have any of that. So, same as you, I always told my mom everything I felt. I had no regrets. She knew it all. And, my mom dedicated her life to me. She gave up everything for me. She worked so hard as a single parent to provide for me. So I knew when that day came that I was going to need to take over the role and become like a mother to my mom, so to speak, that it was just what I was going to do, because she did so much for me. So.
Yeah. And like I said, it's a sacrifice, and what you've done and how you are so open and willing to share that journey, I think is beautiful. And I think it's so needed, because there are so many more people becoming caregivers now than a little bit. So I guess transitioning more into Young Life Interrupted, like, how are you growing your community? Where can we support you? What can we do on the journey to make sure that we're being a part of it?
Sure. Young Life Interrupted came, I took a couple pivots to get where I am right now. I originally started an Instagram account back in 2019, purely just as a means of catharsis and an opportunity to be able to document my journey and just tell like the real raw realities of caregiving. Not really ever thinking anybody was going to find me, was going to send me messages. And then, one thing led to another, and a lot of opportunities to share my story opened up. And, now here we are with Young Life Interrupted. I have my Instagram page, and I'm on Facebook. I have a private Facebook group for young caregivers, because that was one of the things when I first fell into caregiving. I came upon a Facebook group for young caregivers, and I felt like that was such an amazing thing to be able to get into this group and be like, wow, I'm not alone. There's so many people going through a lot of the same things that I'm going through. But I think my proudest piece of Young Life Interrupted at the moment is launching a podcast, Young Life Interrupted, which is the first podcast dedicated specifically to young caregivers. So the podcast is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts right now. And it's just episodes where I'm talking about different topics in my own journey. I'm going to be having guests on in the future, other young caregivers, experts in the field, but really something that hones more in on the young caregiver experience specifically, as just another resource to be able to provide for the ever-growing caregiver community.
I love it. And her podcast, everyone, is fantastic. I do listen to it, even though I'm a seasoned caregiver. I think it's important because just for context, I think the sandwich generation is considered to be like, I've seen it as young as like 34, but I even would think it would skew younger in regards to caregivers. Because I always debate people in my corporate position about the sandwich generation. I'm like, you don't realize there are a lot of children who are thrust into the caregiving role,
right,
even as teenagers. So it is something that is really starting to skew younger and younger, unfortunately. as well as obviously up to, you know, the seasoned adult like myself. I'm in my late 40s, but even I think expanding up into 55. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there so everybody could understand it's a wide net. It's not just those of us who are a little seasoned who are taking care of their families.
Right.
So I admire that. So where we can find, I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes so everyone can find you. I have two more questions for you. My first question is, what is one thing that you feel that someone who is in this journey right now can do to kind of lighten the load a little bit?
Yeah. So this I'm going to make this a quick 2-part piece. So I think the first part relates to lightening the load for yourself. And I think, and again, this is so cliche and you hear it all over the place, the whole self-care term, but honestly, for me, and maybe not self-care and like, why don't you go on a vacation to like a spa and complain? No, it's not even about that, because there's a saying that you need to show up and be your best self to be able to, I forget the phrase, but something to the effect is if your cup is not full, like you're not able to show up for someone else in the way that you need to. So I think in terms of lightening the load, it's really about prioritizing yourself. As much as you need to prioritize your caree, you have to make time for yourself. You know, I always said in my journey that I knew that there was a day that my mom wasn't going to be here. And I didn't want to be left with nothing. I didn't want to be left with nothing in terms of a career, in terms of some sort of goals and directions, in terms of my identity. Because when we fall into caregiving, it's like we almost shed the identity that we used to have because we're not able to partake in the same activities and do the same things that light us up. So I think lightening the load for yourself specifically relates to just taking some time first thing in the morning or at night just to be able to journal or meditate or really help get yourself in a positive mindset before you start your day and at the end of the day. And for me, like really focusing on gratitude helped. It really helped me to see like what I had versus what I was going through and what I didn't have. And I would say another way, which again, people are going to be like, it sounds so cliche. And of course, right now it's really hard with COVID, but you have to find respite care. Like I know that as women, we think that we are super women and we can do it all. Like I was the same way. I was like, I don't need anybody to help with the hands-on. I don't need anybody to help with the back end admin of caregiving, all the paperwork and the doctors. Yeah. I thought I could do it all myself because I thought if I couldn't do it myself, then I was just weak and I couldn't handle it. But the reality is like, that's just like a story that we're telling ourselves. So I'm not saying, and I know that it's expensive, I'm not saying that you need to bring in a private duty aid if you can afford it and you feel comfortable, especially right now with COVID, a couple hours a week just to bring somebody in to relieve you, but also looking into respite care so that once a quarter, like once a month, if you can make it happen, even just having like half a day to be able to focus on you, to be able to go somewhere, whether it's like sitting in your bed, watching Netflix, going to the beach, taking a walk in nature, just whatever it is that fills up your cup, doing that and recharging your batteries so that you can come back to caregiving and really like be ready to take it on with like a fresh new perspective.
Oh, wow. Yes.
The two pieces.
Yes. I felt so inspired and so attacked at the same time. Yes, hon, you are so right about that. Because it is a struggle. And when you're in the caregiving journey, you are 9 times out of 10, you're always going to sacrifice yourself for the caree. And it's crazy because I have a saying in this one, in my house, if mama's not happy, nobody's happy in here. like literally, nobody. I know my mood sets the tone for my entire house. So I have to get myself together. I wish I had learned that earlier. I wish. So anyone who's in that journey, yes, you are 100% dead on the head. So I guess now that you have shared those nuggets with us, I have another question for you.
Okay.
What is one thing that you would want my audience to know about you that you have not said today? Just one thing. Anything.
As it relates to caregiving?
Anything. You can talk about anything. Anything. Just one thing you want them to know about you.
Fun fact, I'm a huge world traveler. So before my mom got sick, I've actually been to 39 countries. And that is like the thing that I live for. Before my mom got sick, and even before she got really sick, I was backpacking for like a month at a time and just praying that nothing would happen to her. But I'm a huge traveler. Like, I love traveling the world. I love going to different countries, and really, like, it's what I save my money for. It's what I like to do with my vacation time. Like, I am not like, I always say, even if I was a millionaire, like, I'll never be into designer bags and clothes and shoes. Like, I like to go thrift shopping, not because I have to, but because I think it's fun.
Right.
So I save my money, and my money goes to travel. I am a wanderlust at heart. I'm a super free spirit, and that is what I live for. And I hope that I can see as much of the world as possible in this lifetime.
Oh, I love you. See, I knew we were connected. I am the same way. Yeah. I am a wanderlust. And I have traveled more as a caregiver than I ever traveled before.
Really?
My sister and I tag team. So I take a portion of the year. Normally I'll go like once a year, like during my birthday, and I'll go to another country. So like right before COVID, I had just come back from Dubai, and I went to, I'm going to say squeezing a trip to Aruba. But You're right. You will learn how to let people take care of your caree so you can live. So yes, I cannot wait to hear about your next adventure.
You too. That's awesome. I love it. We're connected by travel and caregiving.
Yes, we absolutely. and I think it just shows people that there's still a life possible. Yeah. You are just like so inspiring. I am just so honored that you sat down and took time to talk with us today, because I want people to see, even if you're younger in the journey or my age, you can still have a life. You have to have a life. You deserve a life.
But you have to make it a priority. Nobody's going to do it for you. It has to be your decision, and you got to make it happen, and you can make it happen.
Absolutely. And you can still be an amazing caregiver. You can still do everything that you were called to do for your caree and still live. And that's why I wanted to make sure you were on the show. So I want to thank you for spending this time with us today. Like I said, I'm going to have all of your information in the show notes, and I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Pamela, so much. I've loved our conversation.
Me too.
Isn't Adrienne amazing? I just feel so blessed that she was able to sit down and talk with us. And I really hope that all of you got an opportunity to really see that, one, caregiving is really hard. And no matter what area of life that you are in, when you are impacted by it, it's a lot. It's a lot to carry, and you're forever changed by it. But I also want you to see that it is possible to continue to live, because that's something that a lot of caregivers carry the stigma of. It's a stigma because you fear for yourself, like, oh my goodness, all of a sudden my life as I knew it is over. And it is in a way, but it's like a whole new phase of life that you start to enter. And it's all about how you take that opportunity to flip it. And then at the same time, you also have society that kind of makes you feel like, well, this is all she wrote. And that's not it. You're fighting against the stereotype of society saying you're just responsible for taking care of someone and that's all you're going to be. And then also balancing out who you are as a person and making sure that you come out of this thing whole. Because like Adrienne mentioned, and my therapist used to tell me the same thing, caregiving is a season. It's not meant to last forever. And so you have to make sure that you learn the lessons that you were meant to learn in this season, have all the love, make all the memories, do all the things that you were supposed to do in that time. And then at the end, you move on and you continue to live and thrive. So I'm really glad that we took a break from our normal podcast content, but I really kind of feel like this fits within our normal content, because this is something that is really impacting women and across many different age categories. Many of us are being called to this. So I want you to know that there is still life possible. And I hope I inspired you to have honest conversations with your family if you're at that point or you're concerned about some of your family members' health and that you may have to take on this role. Be proactive. Don't be afraid of having the conversations. I can't guarantee that it's going to make it easier, believe me, because I tried that too. But at the same time, it might help maybe prepare you for what could happen. But also know that if it does happen to you, that you're not alone. There are resources out here. There are people that you can talk to, groups that you can join that can help you navigate this new experience for you. So like I mentioned, I'm going to have Adrienne's information in the show notes. I want to thank you so much for supporting us today and listening. I really hope that you enjoyed this conversation. And I definitely will be back next week. I have another special guest that I cannot wait to share with you as well. You know, this has been quite a month of just really preparation and sharing and growing and learning and being good to ourselves. So we're going to keep that going. I hope that you all have a wonderful weekend, and I can't wait to talk to you guys next week. Take care of yourselves and each other. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.